What's going on, folks? Ted from Immersion here, and I'm back. Sorry for, I know I was just away from crazy stuff from work, and then I got really sick on Wednesday and Thursday, and I'm still actually a little bit in the recovery phase, still have a little bit of a sore throat and things like that, but I didn't want to go too long without making a video, and I realized that Strixhaven Curriculum of Chaos, like the early preview copy, will likely be here on my doorstep within the next 2 or 3 days. So I want to get in front of finishing up all the Fizban's content before I start rolling into Strixhaven content. So, that being said, we're going to talk about Chapter 3 of Fizban's Treasury of Dragons, Dragons in Play. Now, this will likely get broken up into several videos, just because if I were to do this whole thing as a marathon, we'd be looking at probably an hour-plus long video. But as it stands, I don't know how long this video will be, so there you go. The other thing I will say is, hey, if you like what I do here, whether it be giveaways, D&D content, simple shorts about rolling different kinds of stats, or in-depth book coverage like this, consider subscribing to the channel. Also, if you're going to be at PAX Unplugged, these boxes over here are just full of different Nerd Immersion related swag, like these, I got these drawstring bags and stuff that I'll have to give away at the convention. And there's also a Fizban's Treasury of Dragons giveaway where you can win a limited edition hobby store exclusive art cover version of the book, as well as a regular copy and some other stuff that ends in 4 days. There's a link to that in the description. Okay, so let's jump in here, and if we go right here to Dragons in Play, you see we're going to probably break it up into these sections, right? So we have role-playing dragons, dragon followers, dragon encounters, dragon adventures, and dragon campaigns. Now, if we start going through this and it becomes apparent that one section is significantly lacking compared to the others, then we might roll a couple together. So this is basically just about, this whole section is a Dungeon Master tool. So players, you're probably not going to find too much here. There is a little bit you might be able to use depending on, for backstories for your character or things along those lines. But for the most part, it even says, right, I didn't even read that. The first sentence literally says this chapter is intended for the Dungeon Master. So basically what it's about is how to deal with dragons in play, right? So a lot of people, depending on how, I guess it really depends on how you approach it. Some people in their head think of dragons as these sort of, like a big mindless lizard with a breath weapon. But in reality, if you do any research into the way dragons are handled in Dungeons and Dragons, they're quite intelligent, some more so than others, but they're thinking beasts, they have goals, they have motivations, and this helps you kind of see how you can use that in the game to your advantage. So why don't we scroll into here to role-playing dragons. So it has a little bit about building out a dragon's appearance, first of all. So we have a D20 table here. How could you make your dragon? So in theory, right, if you were to carbon copy everything from the monster manual, or even from the dragons in this book, every red dragon is the same, right? If you were to look at the miniatures, even over the years, there's been slight art shifts and things as time has gone on to change the way the dragons look from editions to edition. But unless you go ahead and make something specific, every red dragon is nearly indistinguishable from every other red dragon, every green dragon, and so on and so forth. This is giving you a D20 options to hey, how can I make, whatever my specific dragon is that I'm throwing against my players, how can I make it unique, or at least have a standout feature so that, and I guess that's one, so that it's something cool when you're narratively describing the scene and the players start engaging with this dragon, if they do at all. But imagine in a scenario, because dragons, again, are intelligent creatures that will want to flee if they recognize, like, yes, they like having their hoard, yes, they like having their treasure, yes, they like crushing underlings, but most dragons value their own life over all of those things. So when given the opportunity to leave, they will do that. That being said, it's a cool thing if you say, right, so we have, I don't know, sculpted, let's get a good one here. Okay, draped in some semblance of clothing from a stole to a full robe. Okay, so this is a dragon that somehow has found a way to make robes on it, let's say, okay? If your players encounter this particular dragon and it leaves, you could sow seeds throughout the campaign of them hearing about it, it was weird, we saw this dragon, this red dragon in full robes, and they'll be like, oh, that's that dragon we fought. And then, like, eventually when they, like, enter, they hear of a red dragon's lair or something, they go in to deal with it, and then you describe to them, you see a dragon approaching through the shadows, but what's unique is this dragon wears full robes, and they're like, oh my god, that's the dragon from before, like, you could build that up and use this to build mystique about a dragon or to tease its presence, and that's really cool stuff. And we have a couple of options here, right? Here's some red dragons, right? So it says dragons of the same kind can vary widely in shape, size, color, and ornamentation. So to my point, these are each a red dragon. The one on the left, a little bit more chunkier, looks like, with carved scales, a little bit of kind of looks like almost studs along the top here. Whereas this red dragon here looks a little more lithe, but has more ornamentation and these kind of bangles on the hooks and sort of like a necklace and these jewels and crystals hanging. Very cool. Again, and once to that point again, mannerisms. Now, we do have high-level descriptions of how dragons act in the monster manual, but this whole point was to build that out. Now, I'm not going to say that this is the best. It's a couple of random tables here, but you can obviously take this and extrapolate it further if you so choose. But let's take a look, right? Burdens conversation with extensive historical context, whether it's relevant or not. Remember, this isn't necessarily just evil dragons that your party might be fighting. These could be good dragons that they're interacting with. This could be gem dragons that they're dealing with, or however the case may be. Enjoys mimicking humanoid voices, manifests small signs of the breath weapon, such as exhaling smoke rings, setting arc lightning dancing over teeth, or blowing acid bubbles. Sighs restlessly, giving an impression of tremendous boredom. Then it has dragon bonds, all right? So here's again another one. This one has a milky eye. This kind of the phrase on the kind of the ear area, kind of torn and teared. This has, and it has like a bone necklace that it wears. And then again, this is similar to a personality trait or a personality bond that you have for your character. These are bonds for the dragon, right? I collected information about the worlds of, about the worlds of the material plane, and I would love to visit another one someday. I'm trying to collect an extremely rare set of priceless treasures. We have dragons' flaws or secrets, again similar to the personality traits we have for our player characters, right? Another dragon has sworn to find and destroy me. I'm convinced that a version of me in a different world is hoping to destroy me and steal my hoard. All right, a whole section on how to name your dragon, because as we all know, dragons have usually, at least in Dungeons & Dragons, pretty crazy names. But it says, many common phrases have origins in draconic names. Great Googly Moogly, Goody Goody Gumdrops, and Gadzooks all have their origins in the name of the capricious fiend, Galamagala, whatever, whose dragon breath also produced a boppy, trumpety tune, according to Fizban. And they're commonly known as Old Gnawbone. Oh boy, I'm not even gonna bother. Is often seen with a mangled corpse hanging from her mouth, right? So it says some dragons' names resonate with power and inspire terror. Shardalon, Dragotha, Klauth, Kelendros, Malstrix, Vaskar. Others are intricate and obscure, reflecting the grandeur of dragons' ancient language, and all of these names that I'm not going to even attempt to pronounce. Many dragons are better known by their own nicknames, like Klauth is known as Old Snarl. And it goes on and tells you that Icing Death, this is Icing Death's actual name. For those of you Drizzt fans, that's what it actually is. But they are referred to as Icing Death. Again, this is a thing you'll notice if you read through any old historical D&D text, or even any of the existing ones that have dragons in them. They usually have their draconic name and then sort of a common name provided to them based on one factor or another. All right, it says the Dragon Elements table provides draconic morphemes that appear in dragon names. You can combine these elements to form a dragon name. For each element, roll a d20, then choose one of the 4 possible results from the table, or roll a d4 to determine which column to choose from. If you like, you can rearrange these elements or add and drop letters to create a smoother flow or a more dramatic sound. For nicknames, look for inspiration in the dragon's abilities, mannerisms, or most famous acts. So we can see this. We have 4 columns, and it says, for each element, just roll a d20, and we can kind of smush them all together. Or we could roll a d4 to determine which ones we should roll on. I don't actually have any dice in front of me, which is always a shocker whenever stuff like that happens, because I usually always have dice. So I have a digital dice roller. So we're going to head and roll a d20. First comes up here is a 11, which is mirror. Well, we can't just go with mirror. Let's roll another d20 and see what we get. That's a 13 in the second column, so we've got Mir Palar. Well, we could go Palar Mir. That's not a bad sounding dragon name. We could drop a couple of syllables off on there and go, rather than Mir, we could make it Mur or just M-E, and it could be Me Palar or Palermi, or, you know, however you want to switch it around. But you have a lot of options here. You can, even if you just find one that you like I like here, it's Sarix. Is not a bad name. I think that could be a really fun one. You could just take like this and make it Rith Sarix. That sounds like a dragon name to me, right? Durg Sarix. Again, you don't have to keep using Sarix as an example, but it's one that I like. All right, so let's customize our dragons too, because once again, we talked a little bit about physical appearance. Ability-wise, most dragons, if you were to copy them again directly from the monster manual or even from this book, they're cookie cutter, right? What dragon you get, you fight one red dragon, you fought them all. Unless your DM goes above and beyond and changes something to make them unique or make them different than what you would normally expect. Now, I'm not saying that everybody is out there metagaming what a red dragon does, but if you fought a red dragon, and even in the campaign that you're currently in, if you fought one red dragon and defeated it, chances are, if the DM doesn't change anything up, use anything from here, or do stuff on their own end, what you fought before is going to be almost carbon copy of what you're going to fight later. So this is going to give us some options to do that. Right, so simple changes could be just giving them other languages, there's nothing there, or other skills. It says most dragons are proficient in perception and stealth. Give them other skills if you see fit. Now, it does talk here about spells. It says there is a variant rule in the monster manual. I don't really like it, but it says it can give you other spells if you want. A dragon who can innately cast druid spells feels different from one who casts warlock spells. And it gives some other options here. You can borrow traits and actions from other monsters to add unique flavor. Change shape, which again, most metallic dragons have. Give a dragon flyby. That could be pretty nutty, where the dragon can fly in and make an attack and swoop out. They're saying here damage absorption, where instead of being immune to the damage, they actually heal from it. That could be huge depending on the encounter you set up. And I don't necessarily mean like, okay, so if you're fighting a red dragon, your party is not likely going to throw a fireball at the red dragon because they know it's a fire-breathing dragon. But you could give it minions that like shoot a fireball at the party, but also splash damage onto the dragon, and then it heals the dragon while damaging the party. And that can lead to really crazy dynamic combat. I said mimicry here, like the Kenku, right? Ventriloquism was a thing that I think blue dragons used to have in older editions, where they could mimic other people's voices or like throw their voices and stuff. Rejuvenation, you might decide that dragons are your campaign. Say this basically like the Lich, right? Essentially having like a phylactery where when the dragon dies, it comes back so many days later unless something is destroyed, right? It might be preserved in the egg from which it first emerged, its hoard, its cavernous hall, something like that. Again, the whole concept of dragons being much more important to the magic of the material plane as contained within this book. Give them extra senses like blind sight or tremor sense. They have blind sight and dark vision. Give them tremor sense, because I think they even get true sight at higher levels. And then give them tunneler, where they can actually leave tunnels behind them when they go through. They give a little bit here about the lifespan of dragons, as we can see here. Here's a little blue dragon wormling here, and it gives you a little bit about goals for the dragons in the different stages, right? So see, a wormling's goal might be find a good spot for a lair, whereas a young dragon's might be secure alliance of loyal and powerful minions, versus an adult dragon's goal might be develop dragon sight to pursue goals across multiple worlds, where an ancient dragon's might be acquire a particular powerful artifact, perhaps to complete a set, like Eye of Vecna, and then get the Hand of Vecna as well. And they mentioned also here great worms, which was, as we've discussed, are sort of where a dragon becomes aware of its presence on another plane of existence, and they sort of all merge together to become super powerful. Didn't think we'd be talking about dragon reproduction, but I will warn you up front, it's so weird to me that they basically were like, dragons don't bone anymore. It's not a thing. Most of the ways that they describe in this how dragon eggs are originated has nothing to do with like dragon banging. Is that just where we're at in terms of 5th edition, that they don't do that? Which is, I guess, okay. But like, it also makes, because then you would be like, well, how do half dragons happen? Then they literally have a table about how half dragons are born, because most people are like, well, normally they would say that a dragon would take on a human form or a humanoid form, and that would be how you'd eventually lead to a half dragon existing. Not in 5th edition, folks. Dragons are just supreme magic things. No boning. So I'm going to go through all of these because I want to point it out. So spontaneous reincarnation could be how an egg happens. When a dragon dies, it just, boom, makes an egg. They may grow like a fungus as a body rots away, appear among the ashes, kind of like a phoenix situation, or be mined out of the corpse that is turned to solid stone or metal. That's pretty cool, honestly. I do like the concept of like the dragon, a green dragon or black dragon. You know, black dragon, I guess, in the swamp dies and like a fungus mushroom sprouts. I'm getting very xenomorph vibes of like an egg sprouting out of it, but it's a dragon egg. But then obviously if you just defeated that dragon, aren't you just going to smash the egg, or are you going to get into the moral quandaries of it's a baby dragon, nature-nurture situation? Seedlings of the first world. At the heart of the world, underground or in a remote area of pristine wilderness, stands a tree on which dragon eggs grow like fruit. Once in a lifetime, each dragon feels an overwhelming urge to seek out this tree. After finding it, it must persuade its guardian to relinquish an egg. So there's a tree, an egg tree, that just gives out dragon eggs. That dragons are, I guess, basically called to go and get an egg. Sounds like that's what that one's saying. By eating a significant portion of their own hordes, it causes them to lay an egg. So they just eat so much that they literally have a food baby, I guess, if you want to think about it that way. Magical crafting. Mirroring the creative acts of Bahamut and Tiamat, dragons craft their eggs through painstaking labor, then breathe gift of life into them. So that's an interesting one. The dragon voluntarily chooses to make an heir, which, depending on the type of dragon, it also seems like some of them don't necessarily care about their offspring. So interesting to see that this would be in a situation where they're purposefully choosing to make a descendant. Draconic transformation. Enlightened non-humans, or non-dragons, sorry, most often humanoids, are transformed into dragon eggs when they die, when they experience profound enlightenment, or when they undergo a ritual that might involve bathing in dragon blood or being devoured by a dragon. Humanoids and dragons alike understand the transformation to be a transition into a higher state of existence. So this would be, again, yeah, I guess that's like you die, but you were so enlightened in such a way that your death turns you into a dragon egg. And I'd be curious, would you then allow the dragon egg to retain the humanoid's memories when it hatches in dragon form, or is it just completely unaware of its previous enlightened state? Oh, or this is also interesting, bathing in dragon blood turning itself into an egg? Like, I know there's a section even in the half-dragon section talking about bathing in dragon blood turning you into a half-dragon, but turning you into an egg. Interesting. Divine origin. Only Bahamut and Tiamat can create dragon eggs. Each egg is a result of divine intervention. Spontaneous formation. They just pop up out of the ground, often in underground veins of metal ore or gems, metallic dragons, respectively, or in extreme environments, volcanoes, whatever. The eggs might hatch on their own, or they might have to be unearthed first by a creature, whether that's an adult or older dragon or a hapless minor. Parthenogenesis, an adult or older dragon can lay a clutch of eggs whenever they feel ready to have eggs, or impose that responsibility on others. Dragon conclave, 5 adult or older dragons of different kinds come together to create a clutch of eggs, which each giving up a bit of life energy as part of the process. This clutch of eggs hatches 5 dragons of different kinds, depending on the dragons making up the conclave, and an ancient dragon voluntarily enters a deep trance and eventually dies, leaving behind a single egg. So that one's sort of like, again, the sort of lich, kind of phoenix-y, dying and then being reborn as an egg from the ashes kind of a situation. And then I like this conclave one as well, where 5 dragons of the same type, so like 5 gem dragons, all get together and sacrifice a part of their life energy to basically make a clutch of 5 new gem dragons of each of the type. That's pretty cool, but again, none of those are just like the old-fashioned way. Here we can see some miners finding an amethyst dragon egg, and then we have half dragons, which we have we have some information in the player or the monster manual, but we have 6 other options here. Magical influence of a dragon's lair causes a half dragon to spontaneously arise. A dragon can cause a particular tree. This is an interesting one. A dragon can cause a particular tree to produce magical fruit. When eaten by a creature able to bear children, that fruit causes the creature to bear a half-dragon. So it says by a creature able to bear children. So in theory, this could be a bear that eats that fruit, and then it makes a half-dragon bear, which is also funny to me. True love's gift. Love occasionally blossoms between dragons and creatures of other kinds. This life bond can result in half-dragon children. Most half-dragons born of love are created as a magical gift. So that one seems the closest to the old-fashioned way, but they throw in magical gifts, so you never know. Blood transformation, this is what I was just talking about before. A creature that bathes in or drinks the blood of a dragon can sometimes be transformed into a half-dragon. A dragon might voluntarily offer some of its blood to bring this about, or it could happen accidentally when a would-be dragon slayer is splashed with dragon blood. That last part, I think, is also really interesting, where it's not on purpose. Like, they kill a dragon and they get covered in its blood, and then it invokes the transformation. That would be a really cool story beat, but I feel like you'd have to talk to your players ahead of time. But I also wouldn't want to ruin that surprise, so that would be a little tricky, because like I'd want that to be a natural thing. So I guess maybe you'd have to talk to your players up front and say, like, what are you comfortable with me adjusting as we play through this game? Like, do you give me free range? Can I make, like, things happen that'll alter your character? How do we feel about that? Cradle favor, a dragon might bestow a gift of draconic power on a newborn baby or unborn child, either as a blessing or a curse. And then Horde Thieves, this is also an interesting one. The horde of an older dragon is imbued with that dragon's power. Those who steal from such a horde might transform into half-dragons as that power leaches into them. So you thought you escaped kind of scot-free by stealing from the dragon's horde, and it turned you into a half-dragon. Alright, so then we also have Death Throes, Death of a Dragon. So this is, again, what happens when the dragons die. We do have certain creatures in the monster manual that do have things called death throes. I think the Baylor or the Pit Fiend has them. When they're killed, something triggers. And this is saying, like, what could you do for a dragon, right? This is a pretty simple one here. The dragon just uses its breath weapon one last time. Dying. Get everybody with one last shot. Roll on the wild magic sorcerer table. A surge of life energy erupts from the dragon, causing each creature within 120 feet of it to gain benefit of a long rest. Again, that's probably not going to be the evil dragon doing that, but you get the point. Regional reversal. So we know that dragons have certain regional effects. It says when the dragon dies, those effects typically end immediately, but a traumatic death sometimes extends negative effects throughout the region. These can include instantaneous effects as well as lingering magic that persists for a d10 days, and they give you a couple of examples here, right? Like ordinary vegetation within 1 mile, blackens and shrivels, and things that can take time rather than the effects just immediately ending when the dragon dies. And then here's, again, the concept of passing the mantle, because as we said, now the kind of the way they've written dragons is that the power from one dragon when ended flows out into other things. When a dragon dies, the power enfleshed in the dragon doesn't just disappear, it disperses, but in moments immediately surrounding the dragon's death, it can be passed on to others or claimed. I mentioned some of the options up above with reproduction. A dragon's death gives rise to an egg, transferring the dragon's power directly to the new generation. In other cases, a dragon at the brink of death invests its power into another creature, usually a dragon, a sovereign, or something. This can be the draconic gifts that we talked about, or similar to the supernatural gifts or dark gifts, where they go from Theros or Ravenloft. And then there's a couple other things it lists here. Investiture. A dying dragon might willingly pass on its power in different ways. The most common process is the recipient inhale the dying dragon's breath, which often involves being subjugated to at least a diminished form of the dragon's breath weapon. A gem dragon might psionically implant a gemstone on the recipient's body that carries its power. A dragon might instead lay a claw or something like that. When a dragon dies in a violent death, the dragon's power might linger in the corpse, drinking or bathing in the blood. And then automatic transfer. It's also possible for a dragon's power to transfer immediately to, like, jump into the first living creature, and it jumps into the party. And then we have a little bit here about undeath, right? Because we do know that Draco-liches are a thing. And they mentioned it here. It says Chapter 6 deals with additional kinds of draconic undead, a hollow dragon, as well as draconic shards, and also a ghost dragon. But it gives you some adventure hooks dealing with undead dragons. Here we have a black Dracolith here. So we have, let's go. A Draco-lich keeps returning after being destroyed. The Draco-lich's connection to its echoes on other worlds is keeping its soul intact, like a phylactery, and the connection must be severed before the creature's threat can be ended. Now, that's interesting. So they're saying rather than like a traditional phylactery like you'd have for a lich, it's the echoes of this Draco-lich on other worlds that are keeping it alive. So you will either need to find a way to simultaneously coordinate with multiple heroes across multiple planes to kill every incarnation of this dragon at the same time, or find a way to sever its connection to itself upon other planes. That could be a whole campaign wrapped around that, and I really like that. Echoes across the world. So this is talking again more about the concept of dragons from other worlds. We talked about this where that's what leads to a great world. So, or a great worm rather. It says you can use the Dragon Echo characteristics table to help you decide what aspects of a dragon's echo are similar to the dragon you know and which are different. So same dragon kind and age, but different in physical appearance. Radically different in almost every way imaginable, but still bound by fate across the worlds, or this one. In addition, the Echo is undead, a Dracolich, a Hollow Dragon, or something like that, or a Shadow Dragon. So it's a completely different version, which is also interesting to think about, because, like, you know, the Red Dragon on your plane, it's actually a Shadow Dragon on the other plane, and a Dracolich on the third plane, which is cool. Then we have a little bit about the gods, which is unfortunate because they do basically just negate the existence of the dragon gods that existed previously. There's an entire dragon pantheon in older editions, and they basically have said it's Bahamut and Tiamat and nobody else. But we'll take a look. We'll keep going through, right? So Bahamut and Tiamat, the primordial dragons and perverted creators of the first world and closest thing to gods among dragon kind. Since the destruction of the first world, they dwell in the outer planes, Bahamut in Mount Celestia, Tiamat in the Nine Hells. Talks about how in Kryn, in the world of Dragonlance, they were known as Paladine and Takesis. I think that's how you say it. Bahamut is revered as a god of justice and nobility. Tiamat is god of greed. Dragons view the primordial dragons differently. To metallic dragons, Bahamut is more like a king than a god. And then we can kind of scroll down. I think they mentioned them here, yeah. A few other dragons also command reverence from their kin. A few are ancient dragons who have cultivated their dragon sight to such a degree that they can coordinate the actions of their echoes across the material plane, influencing events on multiple worlds. Humanoids might consider these gods, but they're not. Such enlightened dragons include Asterinian, a brass dragon who serves as a messenger for Bahamut, Chronepsis, a black dragon who now resides in the Outlands, sometimes imagined as a god of fate, and Tamara, a silver dragon of transcendent beneficence, described as a god of life. Right? Chronepsis, I believe, also used to be a god of death or time. Now they're listed here as a god of fate. These were all, again, dragons in the original draconic pantheon of old that are now basically just being described as either great worms or highly enlightened dragons, not true dragon gods. Dragons are not religious by nature. They can grow to become so. Some of the most formidable creatures in the multiverse without relying on any external power. That said, some dragons could be described as spiritual. Dragons might cultivate an awareness. It's interesting because, you know, they could fight clerics who literally have powers of gods. And we also know from that Elegy of the First World thing that they know of the gods because the gods are kind of what fought them initially. We have a little bit about the shape-shifting concept here, right? How it's typically reserved for metallic dragons. But it says if you use a monster manual variant to make dragons innate spellcasters, you could give any adult or older dragon the polymorph spell. But basically they're saying you can essentially apply shape-shifting to anybody if you want any kind of dragon. Dragons typically use their shape-shifting ability to move about the world without drawing attention to themselves. Many metallic dragons also believe they are following the example of Bahamut, who, as they show as Fizban here, travels around in human form often. In any of these forms, he's often accompanied by 7 gold dragons. They're the Canaries. Famously, Bahamut traveled the world of Kryn as a humanoid wizard named Fizban. They prepare the world against the forces of Tiamat. In the same way, some metallic dragons use their humanoid forms to influence people. And then what I think is probably the biggest travesty, another one, is the complete negation of other types of dragons, such as song dragons and steel dragons. There's this little sidebar that basically says they never existed ever. And considering 5th edition is the current canon and negates all previous canon, the propensity of some metallic dragons to spend long periods of time in humanoid form has led to bits of folklore, including tales in which shapeshifters are sometimes erroneously identified as unique varieties of metallic dragons. In the world of the Forgotten Realms, stories speak of were-dragons or song dragons, which are variously described as beautiful humanoids transformed into dragons, or a distinct variety of metallic dragon. The world of Greyhawk has legends of similar dragons, called either Greyhawk dragons or steel dragons, which are said to favor life among humanoids. The creatures featured in these legends are almost certainly copper, silver, or other metallic dragons who have simply favored that particular form. Some dragons even seem to prefer humanoid form to their own and delight in surrounding themselves with companions who can answer their endless questions about humanoid art, culture, history, and politics. So they essentially said they never existed, they were just metallic dragons being cheeky. And that sucks, because I really like the lore, and the uniqueness, because there was lore and uniqueness about all of those other kinds of dragons, that has just been washed away in a sidebar. And then we have a little bit about draconic organizations. I think this is probably going to be, actually, is this was technically another section? You know, we'll just do this section because there's not a lot. And it's just basically just talking a little bit about the different, you know what, I think we'll stop it here. It's been about a half an hour. We'll stop it here. We'll save draconic organizations for the next video. Then we'll go through the other ones as well. Because I think the followers and draconic organizations can kind of be lumped together. So there you go, folks. That's Dragons in Play Part 1, Role-Playing Dragons. Let me know what you think about this. It's an interesting thing. I do like the concept of making unique monsters. I think it would be nice to have this kind of stuff for other creatures as well as just, aside from just dragons, right? For fiends and mind flayers and, you know, aberrations and whatnot. Really build this out so that we can make, you know, Mind Flayer A different from Mind Flayer B. And while you and I, perhaps as more veteran dungeon masters, will say, yeah, that's an obvious no-brainer, I can even just change the color of the Mind Flayer and then it makes it unique. New DMs or people new to the game don't necessarily feel comfortable. This is something I've learned in the comments over the years. There is a large group of people out there that don't feel comfortable changing things in the game until Wizards of the Coast literally gives them permission to change things in the games in the form of a table or something like this in this kind of a book. This gives them the okay, the approval, I guess you could say, to go ahead and make those changes. And some people legitimately don't feel comfortable doing that until they're told in the form of a table or some sort of variant that says, no, you can make these adjustments. So I do appreciate this. I would have to see a little bit more to it there. Maybe some example cool dragons rather than just like a couple of 20, you know, number tables. A little bit more expansion there. Because that's really it, right? We went through the whole section as dragons as characters. Now we have a little bit coming up after this about other things in the world that interact with dragons, like how to do adventures and campaigns and things. And we will have a little bit more about specific dragons in the Draconomicon chapter. But this is kind of the main section that I was hoping got a little bit more depth, maybe an extra 20 pages somewhere in here to build this out a little bit. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Stay tuned for more Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. And once I actually have, I believe my Strixhaven copies are arriving on Sunday. So once I have them in hand, keep an eye on YouTube here and other social medias for Nerd Immersion, where I will let you know that, hey, the live stream where I'm going to be doing the read-through of this is happening at X time. Also, legitimately working on a podcast. So be on the lookout for that coming in the next couple months. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.